Hey guys, welcome. In this video, we are going to help you hack your personality type because we are such firm believers that knowing your personality type totally sets you up for success, but it seems like everybody mistypes. And we even started going encouraging people, test with a significant other or with your best friend. And I think people still mistype. And so we thought we're going to try to reverse engineer this and talk about if you tend to do this, this, and this, then we're going to categorize you. So you're going to need a pen and paper for this. We're going to start off by covering Myers-Briggs. And so Myers-Briggs personality typing has 4 letters. Okay, you're either an E and an I, E or an I, an S or an N, a T or an F, J or a P. And so I'm going to hand it off to my experts, and they're going to tell you, I'll hold on to this for you. So E versus I.
So E versus I is the simplest one to tell apart because it's something that you're probably very acquainted with, even if you don't know what Myers-Briggs is. E and I is introversion versus extroversion. Now, I still see a common mistype here is that people tend to think they're introverted because they enjoy doing things that don't require people. That doesn't necessarily mean you are an introvert. The biggest difference between introvert and extrovert is one gets energy and feels energized by being alone and doing things solo, versus extroverts are energized by being around people, socializing. Now, you can still be an introvert and like people, and you can still be an extrovert and like being alone. Do you think that's something?
And I like to think of it in terms of percentages because everyone has an extrovert in them and everyone has an introvert in them. And so if 60% of the time you prefer to be an introvert, then you're probably an introvert. Even though that 40% of the time is essential to your life, that you need that 40% extrovert in your life, you could still be an introvert.
And it's really something that we struggle with. I mean, we know our personality type. We know for sure that they are both introverts, and I'm dang sure I feel like that I'm an introvert too. However,
all 3 of us would say we love people still.
Yeah. And it's really where you get your energy from. And I know for me in my case, the big difference, if I'm an introvert versus an extrovert, it's going to just shift the order of my functions, but they're still pretty much the same function. The fact that every video I like to have my pointer stick tells me there's much more chance that I'm a commander and not a architect, but I'm around 6 people all day long. So it's really hard to tell. My life sets me up. I guess it's the thing. It's like maybe your job, you are like, well, I'm around people all day. I need a break. I must be an introvert. It's hard.
Well, you could be a 70% extrovert and all of your day is taken up as an extrovert, so you just don't even get that 30% introvert.
Yeah, so keep both sides in mind as you're going through and take into account how you're living your life so that you don't go into a mistyping scenario.
And like we were saying, the real big thing is that your first and second function end up being flipped if you're introverted.
It might depend based on what the typing is, but for most of them, if you're introvert or extrovert, it'll just flip the functions around a little.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in this long video. Okay. Point being, I versus E is important, but I personally think it's not one of your most important in
not going to be the first way. So we spent hours trying to decode this to be the most simple way possible for you to understand. Yes, that's me. No, that's not me. And then process of elimination. And so introvert and extrovert is not the first way we're going to show you how to do that process of elimination because of the fact that you do have it's most likely to have an equal balance.
And I don't think if you mistype in E versus I that it has as
dramatic effect.
Yes, I think so. Pay attention to the next ones because those ones, especially this next one, I think has a huge effect on how you apply the personality type to all these other things. So Gabby, S versus N.
Okay, so S versus N is a difficult one because most people want to think that they're N's, and there's nothing wrong with being an S. The thing is though that a lot of times we think of ourselves as an N type, when the truth is that only, 20% of the population is
I think that's
N?
about it.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be that 20% because it's special. It's important for us to look at ourselves and think, okay, what am I realistically looking at myself as? Because what happens is if we a lot of times we identify ourselves as N types, but then what happens is that it completely flips all of our functions, as we're going to talk about, because you have 4 functions in your personality type. And really the way you look at S versus N is How do you?
Yeah.
How do you
So
explain?
this is, again, in case we didn't tense it enough, this, in my opinion, is going to be the most important one. When I first tested, I thought I was completely different type because I thought I was N, and that set me up for this different mindset and not seeing myself correctly. The biggest difference between S and N is one's called intuitive and one is called observant or sensing. Intuitive people tend to be these open-minded thinkers who think outside the box and take larger jumps mentally to new ideas. And then observant types are more focused on the real world in front of them, and they're more observing their surroundings. Now, that
We
doesn't...
should use the example of when we were driving, right? In the
Yeah, and so we were driving one day. Here's an example. She's intuitive, I'm observant. And we're driving in the car and we're stopped at a stoplight and there's someone in front of us. And they're just sitting there talking, and out of nowhere, I'm just saying, is that a dead coyote on the top of the car in front of us? And they're like, what? Oh yeah. Like, that's how you can
we
see.
didn't see it at all. There's the difference between N and N is like
Is
a
so
broad-
crazy.
The N types tend to look so far into the future within their own mind of the intangible that they don't see what's right in front of them.
Yeah, and so if you definitely take this into account when you're typing, you might think, oh, well, I have ideas. I can think outside the box. That doesn't necessarily mean you're intuitive. Don't assume that immediately. You can still have ideas or still have an open mind and be observant.
You can also be, if you're an S type, you can have an N function, which sounds confusing, but it's very possible that you can be generally an S type. And you could be a well-developed, working towards your higher self. And if you are, then you'll be able to tap into your third and fourth functions. And so these third and fourth functions, we typically don't access until we are working on ourselves and trying to be better or have more self-awareness. And when we are that person, we actually will have more N tendencies, even if we are generally S.
Yeah. So be honest with yourself when you're typing and decide, like, okay, realistically, am I probably more S? And if that's the case, which is generally going to be more likely because more of the population is S, then just accept it, because if you're going to mistype yourself as an N, it's going to set you up to be so confused and on the wrong path. Exactly.
I think the biggest take home of that one is like S's are so much more detail oriented. They literally just see either pictures in their head or the things that are right in front of them engaging in, whereas N types are way more idea based.
Head in the clouds types.
Like, oh yeah, future for it. Okay, so then that gives
Now
us
we have
to,
T and F.
this
So-
one's I think easier to
Yeah, T and F will be definitely easier in most parts to tell apart, because it controls how you act towards people or how you interact with things that come your way.
information.
Yeah.
Whether it's you're a thinking, T is thinking, F is feeling.
Yeah.
So
So if you're a thinking type, you're going to interact with people and you're going to respond to problems. You're going to respond to them with logic, with information, with data, and think rationally. But if you're a feeling type, you're going to take into account, what am I feel? That's going to be your top priority, is what am I feeling? How is this going to make this person feel? What are the emotions around me? So it's a very obvious difference. However, if you're T type, you can sometimes think because you care about others that means you're F. That's not necessarily so. It just comes down to when you're facing a problem, is your first instinct to go to others' emotions and your own emotions and the emotional consequence, or is it going to go straight to logic and rationality?
Yeah, I think he's explained that pretty perfectly. It's really because you have to take into account, like you said, that thinking types do still care about people. All humans care about other people. And so just because there are times, like, of course you're going to care about your family, but for the majority of problems that come your way, are you looking at it from a logical standpoint, or are you looking at it from a standpoint of how am I going to best make everyone else around me happy? Feeling types tend to be more empaths and HSPs, highly sensitive people, and they can kind of feel the emotions of other people more, and they take that into account in their decision making.
Yeah, so if you can figure out if you're T or F, it is going to make a big difference in your cognitive functions. And really the all of typing you want to be able to correctly tell what your cognitive functions are. So figuring out whether you're T or F is going to change your cognitive functions, so rationally or emotionally decide which one you realistically are.
So SJs, or not SJs, sorry.
P
J versus
and J.
P. P
So-
and J is prospecting versus judging, and those words are kind of confusing. But the simplest way to think of it is either J likes routine and planning, P does not like routine and planning. Now there are some small differences in here depending on what your other letters are, and so that's what our first process of elimination is going to go through.
So don't worry, like right now you have your pen and paper. If you wrote a few like, oh, I tend I or E or that's not that important. Now's when you're going to want to start writing down. So our first question is going to be, ask yourself, do you enjoy change? Yes or no? Do you prefer newness? Do you prefer routine? And so we're going to start off with the STJ type. So don't worry about if you're E or I, but this is how you kind of put yourself in the STJ is change. Do you like change? And they're okay with it. It's not like you love change, but you're okay with it. Like, I could do something different. The big thing is that you prefer routine.
Yeah, if you're an STJ type, you're not going to be the spontaneous person who wakes up and says, I'm bored by my routine, I want something new. STJ types are perfectly fine being in their routine, and then eventually they'll plan something new, but they want to know exactly what they're heading for.
So I would say that the check marks are, you're a good planner, okay? You prefer routine, you are really good at school or work, you fit very well into systems.
You typically could even be good at managing things, right?
Mm-hmm. Very good at managing things. And I know I kind of cut Gabby off for a second. Do you want to explain, as we go through this, we're going to naturally explain it, but just overview what the P types mean versus the J types. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't know if you wanted me to dive into
You
it
could
because
just touch on it real lightly.
Yeah, prospecting types. A prospecting type doesn't always not do routine. The thing is that a prospecting type by nature, they choose not to do routine, but what happens is actually that because prospecting types can be all over the place, they actually can sometimes be drawn to routine to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And that's just good to keep in mind when you're wondering whether, I'm in a routine, so I couldn't be a prospecting type. You actually have to think about, well, would my natural tendency, if I didn't have to be a responsible adult, would I just want to be all over the place? And the second one is prospecting types typically have trouble planning things in the future. It's not 100% though. I think there's 1 or 2 personality type exceptions of the 8 types who are prospecting.
And so again, like you said it perfectly, Gabby, but also too, there is like some exceptions, like she said, in prospecting and judging, but mainly prospecting types prospecting types, while they might like routine, they're going to be mainly focused on newness. They're going to thrive off of new things. So you might think that someone you know or yourself, you are a judging type because you like your routine. That's not the case. You want to look at, am I always looking for the next best thing? Am I looking at, they kind of can tend to be a consumer of both life and literal and objects. So they're always looking for new things to encounter with. Right?
Right. And so we'll break this down more, but that's the general idea, that prospecting types have trouble planning and sticking to routines, and they like newness. Judging types typically don't. However, there are going to be some where you have 2 of this and 1 of that, and that's going to distinguish what personality type you are.
So with the STJs, like I said, you fit really well into systems, and that's one indicator. If you think back to like your schooling, your education, like, oh yeah, it was good for me to like have a list of my homework. I get my homework done, I turn it in. So of the STJ types, we've got an I in front of it or an E in front of it. So if you are I, fact oriented, you're a little more opinionated, and you have great follow through.
And you're also, if you're so the 2 differences is, you're going to be ISTJ, which is called a logistician, or ESTJ, which is an executive. If you're introverted, you're going to be not going to care too much for crowds, and you're going to be more interested in doing research solo.
Definitely. And if you're E, you're an executive, so you're great at connecting dots and running big projects. Okay, you tend to fill the administrator role.
Yeah, you're going to like to take the organization aspects in all your facts, but then apply them and oversee the groups that are doing them more.
So the key thing to note is that if you were trying to distinguish whether or not you could be an STJ, ask yourself whether are you great at or do you really enjoy having a routine? Do you enjoy newness as long as it's planned newness? And
do you also do you take in facts and handle them well?
Definitely. So those are the 3 questions to ask yourself.
And then switch to SFJ.
So then we get into the SFJs. If STJ, ISTJ, and ESTJ didn't sound like you, then we're gonna go into the next one. This is another 2 Myers-Briggs types that you might be. These are the SFJs. There's 1 letter different from the last one, and that means your dominant feeling over dominant thinking. And how this plays out is that you tend to be very empathic towards people, and your first reaction is always, how can I help others? You walk into a room and these people are naturally empathic and caring, and they're going to see and ask you, how are you? What do you need? They're going to seem very in tune with other people's emotions. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely, because both of them are going to have the same first function. Now, both of these types, again, they are really function best when they're within a routine. And this type, as opposed to the STJs, the SFJ really doesn't necessarily crave change or newness.
Yeah, they very much, even more so than the STJs. They like the routine more. They occasionally, it doesn't mean they don't want to go out to a new restaurant if you invite them, but they're going to be perfectly happy in their routine every day.
Yes, if you follow us on Nomads, my husband is an ISFJ, and that is why travel is so hard for our
And
family.
the difference between an ISFJ, an introverted, versus an extroverted SFJ is that the ESFJ is going to be the person who's kind of the leader of groups in your community.
Yeah, they're called the consuls. These people are, they always depict them as the cheerleaders of the groups, always there to help people and cheer them on, saying, let's go guys, we got this. This is going to be amazing. Does everybody have what they need?
Of what everyone else is up to. They can sometimes be good at making connections within community of this person, you should meet this person, whereas the ISFJ is typically the one-on-one, what would you say? Dad is a perfect example. He's a personal trainer, and he's the perfect person to be like, okay, how can I help you individually?
Yeah, you summed it up. I'm going to recap that again just to make sure they understand the difference between the two. If you're thinking you're an SFJ, if you're an ISFJ, you're going to be the defender. You're going to be very, you're not going to care so much for big parties. That's a big one. The ESFJ likes the parties more. The ISFJ, though, is more focused on one-on-one interaction and engaging with that person, understanding their emotions, and helping them as much as possible. And if you're the ESFJ, you're going to like the parties more. You're not going to necessarily want to be the center of attention, but you're going to love having that many people around you, and they're going to be focused on the big group and seeing how they can help everyone get what they need.
Perfect.
As far as planning.
As far as planning?
Yeah, those 4 types, do you think...
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So, whether or not you're extrovert or introverted, the SFJ compared to the STJ, the feeling types are going to have more trouble planning for the future. While both types prefer routine, but the STJ is very good at planning future trips, any future plans for their life, and they actually don't mind change as long as it's planned. This type has trouble coming up with a detail-oriented plan for their future. They're great at details in the moment, like a week in advance, a month in advance, but anything long-term, they have trouble for having that sight into the future.
Perfect.
Or one thing I noticed about, because we know a couple of both extroverted, the consul and the administrator, I think a lot of consuls will see themselves as good planners, but it's just relative. They might be able to plan one aspect or 2 aspects, but it's not so big, like connecting multiple dots. That's a big thing that makes them different. Because I know some consuls that are like, no, I'm really good. I planned this trip. I planned my retirement. I planned these one elements, but it's based on stability.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it always, if you know anything about the cognitive functions, this is because it comes down to cognitive functions. So if you're...
We'll do cognitive functions at the end, and then we won't confuse them too much. But so if any of this is like, ooh, it's kind of me, if this is like, this is not me, then just ignore everything we just said.
And on to the next one.
So now we're going to keep the J. These are still judging types, but instead of being an S, they're N. They're an intuitive judging type.
Yes.
Take it away, Gabby, the expert NJ.
Okay, NJ. Okay, NJs are completely in their head in the future. If we combine those 2 letters simplistically, the N type is all about the theoretical, ideological, potential ideas for the NJ because is future oriented. prospecting types tend to be more present. So an NP would be more, oh, right here, right now, I'm gonna look at these things and combine them. Whereas an NJ is that, how can I combine these big ideas and combine them into a detailed plan and then apply it in actuality?
These people tend to be really good entrepreneurs or business starters because they have these grand ideas that they can apply logically.
And they actually do them, as opposed to an NP has like even probably better ideas, but zero follow through.
Yeah, and they're different from the SJs because the SJ is focused on what they already know and applying that in a plan, whereas the NJs are creating new ideas and creating new things and applying it into a plan.
If you're an SJ, you follow very systematic. A, then B, then C. An NJ is going to grab K and L and maybe
Z
B and pull them together, but then still put it into a plan.
Perfect.
I think that was a pretty good explanation.
So should we go into these?
So Gabby and I are both NJs, but she's an NFJ and I'm an NTJ.
And so the difference is that your first function is the same. You're both NI. You're in your head trying to come up with these ideas, but then your second function is different. So I am an FE and she is a T. So the difference is that my first extrovert function, anytime I'm in an extroverted scenario, I'm thinking about the feelings and emotions of the people around me, and I use that to kind of make my decisions. Where she is coming from a place of logic.
Maximum efficiency.
Maximum efficiency. I mean, I would say I had maximum efficiency too. So that's the NI function. So
The big difference is that if you're an NFJ, you're going to be more aware of how people are seeing you or how others are seeing each other, more empathic, whereas an NTJ can have the attitude of, I don't care what people think.
So we basically come down to she's compassionate and I'm just assertive. And that pretty much summarizes it.
Done. If you're thinking you're an NFJ,
because I was like actually my type in presenting the type.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, if you're an NFJ, you're going to be ideas, thinking forward, but also a little bit of, oh, how's everyone feeling right now? What are they thinking of me? How is this idea interacting with things around me? Whereas an NTJ is going to be like, let's do the plan, let's get the ideas. Who cares if anyone
the NTJ
doesn't like
is
it?
called the architect, so they're really good at
Or the commander. So let's go. Let's do that. So if you're an NTJ, you're either an I NTJ or an E NTJ. So you're either architect or commander.
And you'll be able to tell a commander really quick.
So a commander and
Will you? Are you sure about that? Okay.
come on,
I'm
give
glad
me
we're having
answers.
fun. I'm glad we're having fun
Too
with
much
this.
fun here. I'm just kidding. So the ENTJ versus the INTJ, I was going to suggest that it's a kind of difficult to tell the difference because an architect, they actually have the exact same patterns. The difference is whether or not they're extroverted first and then scheming second, or if they're scheming first, then extrovert in commanders second. So how would you feel
the big difference between commander and architect, other than the fact that you already know how this is how the introvert versus extrovert plays out. If you're an ENTJ, a commander, you're gonna like to be the one who's delegating more, whereas the INTJ, the architect, is gonna be a little more about doing their projects. They're gonna like drawing in more and not working with others, whereas, like I said, the commander's gonna be like, you do that, you should do that, I need you to do that. In the architect
genuinely would love to come up with their own architect plan.
Yeah, and then just do their plan. But the thing is that you can, because those I and E are so similar, you can kind of bounce between it if you're
I would say
easy
most
on
people
that
could
one.
bounce between them, but
I
this
would
type
say
is more-
realistically, I'm probably a commander who thinks they're an architect because of the fact that I just am around a big family a lot. But I still need a certain amount of alone time to like think of the best process. But realistically, once I have that time, I'd much rather step in and be like, hey, you're on that project, you're on that project. I have a really hard time, like literally putting this video into a course. I would never actually get it done without delegating it to like, hey girls, you need to help me do this so that I actually do it, because I just rather come up with the ideas and tell people this is what you should do than to sit there and do it myself.
Yeah. So that sounds good. The NFJ, this one I think is pretty easy to tell the difference between an introvert and an extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
The extrovert of this type is actually pretty rare. I mean, it's not technically rare, but we don't see this often in the world because people who are the extrovert version of this tend to fall into that ESFJ. Now,
Yeah.
we're talking about the ENFJ here. So the ENFJ is the extrovert coordinator of everything. Now, as opposed to the console likes to be the coordinator of events and people in their communities on a small level.
In the present.
In the present or in the short term rather than the grandiose term. Protagonists I like to think of as the big event leaders. You can't have events without people like this because they are able to take a zoomed out perspective of all the things that need to be coordinated in terms of people, and they're great at communicating, and they can put together large projects on a more social level. Whereas and I say social level because they are extroverts, they love dealing with people, but they're also great planners.
Yeah.
Now the INFJ is what I am, and the INFJ is what can probably describe me better than me.
Well, first off, everyone I've seen, everyone I've ever known thinks that they're this type. They always assume that they're INFJ, and I don't know why, but this type is a very common mistype. So if maybe you already took the test and it says you're an INFJ, listen close to this video to get a closer look. Because the INFJ is called the advocate, and they're 2% of the population. 2%. That's pretty small. And how the advocate is that they're a little mix of the architect and the protagonist. And how this shows up is that the reason they're different from the architect is that they're not all logic based. They're an F type. They're more aware of how other people are feeling, but they're also not going to appear quite like the F types we talked about before, where they're super empathic, like, what do you need? These people,
the N is very dominant in the advocate. So their first function is the NI. So that's what makes them typically, that's why I made the joke that I think I'm pretty efficient too, because my N wants to be as efficient as possible, which makes me sometimes seem like a T type, but truthfully is that I'm first N, and then secondarily I want to make sure I don't hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, and advocates, these people tend to be, because they're introverts, they're not going to want to go to the social events and everything quite in a way.
Maybe.
Or let's just discuss it. Like,
or they're definitely not
perfectly.
going to be the loudest person at the party.
That's more what I mean. Yeah.
I think the hard thing, because we always talk about a lot of people mistype themselves as INFJs. A lot of people think they're advocates, and that's okay. You know how you see yourself, but you really notice if you're an advocate. When we get into Enneagrams, I think it'll make it more clear. So when we get there.
The advocate has this tendency that they just want to see the world flourish, and they want everyone to live in their fullest expression of
but they're not loud about
peace.
telling you to do it.
Yeah.
So you have to read between the lines. You'll see it in their expression through their creativity, probably. You'll see it in their writing. You'll see it in videos that they make. They're not going to overtly tell you necessarily, because so and real quick on the extroverted version of Gabby is, I always think of PTA mom, and so they didn't go to school, they don't know what this. You've watched any
we
videos?
We want the boys who are watching this
to feel like, okay, I get it. Well, PTA dad too. We all PTA leaders are equal, okay? But I get it. Victor feels like he's always in the female role. But continue. Real quick, PTA, like, is different than the principal and the vice principal. Those are your executives. So think of the difference, the ESTJ versus the ENFJ. I think those, which two letters are different, but they could be looked at very similarly. They give the difference. If you are the principal or the vice principal, you are following structures and systems. If you're the PTA mom, you still have you're processing a lot of stuff, but you're also like on a community basis. Like, we're going to bring in all these ideas and let's make them flourish.
Yeah, they're not the console, because the console, which would be the S version of that, would be very in tune with the details of other people's lives.
They're literally the second they're best friends. They're the one who's like implementing.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, in a way, how you explained it, remember the event scenario? It's like that. The protagonist will be the person who coordinates the entire event. The executive will be handling all the little details of everyone performing at the event.
The console will be the person greeting you.
Yeah, the greeting at the event, or in this on the ground level, introducing everyone.
So before we go into P, I just did a real quick summary. So if you are
I need to hold it closer.
Okay. If you are a J type, you like routine and you're a planner. Okay, you hold it while I point. So J, you can plan, whether you're a great planner or not a great planner. You have some element of planning and some element of routine. You don't mind, some of you don't mind newness, but overall, whereas the P's, we're going to go the other end. If you're SJ, you pay attention to details, you talk in the past. This is how I know when somebody talks to me. If they're talking about memories, past events, or something they're seeing right there in front of them, they're probably S. If they're talking about big picture ideas or they're talking about the future, they're probably N. Then you're either thinking, you're gathering those ideas and logically thinking them out, or you're feeling and you're more empathetic, you're introverted, you're doing all these details more in your head, or you're extrovert, you're asserting them on the world.
Perfect.
Yes? All right,
Perfect.
let's go
Did
into...
we miss a J, or was that all of them? Oh, that was all of them.
That was all of them. All right, let's go on to P types.
Hopefully by now you have a good idea of whether or not you are a J type.
If you're
You
not,
might have to. You might not by now. No, understand, because there are going to be some P types like we said, that are going to be a little bit routine oriented. That you might have some mistyping already happening. So pay attention.
yeah. So next we're gonna go on.
What's
to
the big thing with P's? P's don't stick with plans long term. They might think, right?
Yeah. I'm like, just
Get
so
in the
good.
future. Well, it's because I wanted to look at my notes. So big thing, P types, you might think, well, okay, the world sets up the world's set up for J's. If you're a P type, you're gonna know because you have this little bit of struggle. Whether you struggled as a kid, you struggled, or you didn't struggle because your mom homeschooled you and made sure that you had a prospecting life. But overall, P types, the world's not set up for you as well. It's getting better for sure because you have options and a lot of the digital
Opportunities.
So P types, you might think you can do a plan, but can you stick with a plan? Like if I said you had to do that plan for 30 years, or do you have ideas and you still are one day gonna do it? You are probably a P type.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That sums it up well.
Okay, so let's start with NPs.
NP types. Okay, so we're gonna talk about SPs in a little, but the NP types are gonna be
Let's start with
pretty
N
different.
NTP.
Sorry,
versus
we did P's. I'm sorry, we did P's with F and T to compare to the difference.
Yeah,
That's
so
how-
we're in NP or just
no.
FT first.
Do F versus T. That's
Okay.
Good
So
thing you love us. So F,
yeah.
FP versus a TP. So instead of looking at the prospecting types, whether you're intuitive or observant, because I think a lot of people can confuse some qualities of them as feeling versus prospecting, or thinking
or
versus
intuitive even versus prospecting, because intuitive is like, oh, I have all these ideas, this must be prospecting, when really it's that,
or vice versa.
or vice versa.
People who are prospecting, I think, often mistype themselves as Gabby's type because they think it's that they have all these ideas, but it's really they just have trouble sticking with a plan, so they bounce around a lot.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right, so if you are a feeling prospecting versus a thinking prospecting.
So if you're feeling prospecting, you're going to have a certain always have a certain cognitive function called FI, versus if you are a TP type, you're going to have always a TI, I believe. And the big difference, it makes a big difference here because the TP versus the FP are going to show very differently at first. And if you're an FP, you're going to be very much more social, and wouldn't you agree? Or
Yeah, so
more feeling
I was
based
even going
in
to say
general?
FP is TIFE, right?
Yes.
No,
Or
sorry,
FP. Or FP is FI, and then they'll have TE.
Yes, okay. So this is where we're going to talk about functions a little, because there's a big difference when you are an FP type. You have an FI function. So even though you're a feeling type and you care about other people's emotions, typically the FI, so when you have that P function following your F, it actually means you're going to be more internally feelings oriented. Yeah. So you're still kind of compassionate, but you're dominantly thinking about, okay, what do I feel like in this moment?
Can
I feeling
can
sad
I add
or
is that it might be on the subconscious level?
Yeah, that's true.
I think the people that I know that are FPs do not think of themselves, and you guys might think like, oh, you mean they're selfish? No, they're just internally, their internal feelings are what drive them through life.
Yes.
But a lot of them aren't aware of them. But now, if you're this type, you're going to be aware of this because of this amazing video. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh. And then versus if you're a TP, you're never going to have the FI function. You're going to have a TI function instead. And what this means is that you are very focused on collecting all the information, whether it's through experience or through literal data, and you're going to be putting it into these boxes in your mind. You're going to focus on like an internal harmony of understanding how things fit together in life. Wouldn't you agree?
So do you want to break down NTP versus STP?
Yeah,
first?
one of the others is, so prospecting, you're all over the place, you're either thinking or feeling, but I think a way to look at it is if you are, I did this in my homeschooling one for cognitive functions, if she's a TP. If you're a TP, you don't need as much structure because of your thinking process and putting things into boxes. You kind of, you bounce around between things, but you're a little bit more self-driven.
Yeah, that's a
If
good
you're
point.
an FP,
I don't know if it's necessarily self-driven, but logically driven.
Yeah, and if you're an FP, you're gonna
she can hold herself accountable to, like, today I'm just going to draw for 8 hours, and then the next day I'm off doing something else for 8 hours. FPs, even though you're driven by your own emotion, you're actually a lot of times can't hold yourself accountable.
because you're so emotionally driven. Organization is hard for them.
And so you need a little bit, like, so say you are like, you like change, but you stay in the same job for a long time because you know deep down that it keeps you accountable, that all these great ideas or bouncing from one thing to another would be fun, but you wouldn't actually do it.
Yeah, or more so if they have a routine, it makes it so their brain is clearer so that they can focus on their feelings more and feeling emotionally good.
The FP, I think of how at their best, the best way for an FP to function in some ways is to have a routine for a certain amount of time. Like, I'm going to do this one routine for 6 months and have this one job for 6 months to maybe a year or 2 years, but then knowing that I'm just going to, after that year, I'm going to do a totally new routine, but then I have to stick to a routine because it holds me accountable.
That's a perfect example. I think that's a great way to tell if you are an FP.
So let's talk about TP. So she's a TP. She's an STP versus an NTP.
So the NTP and the STP are still going to have that function of TI, but then they're going to have either one called SC or NE. And here's how you're going to see it. If you're an NTP type, you're going to seem more argumentative, I think, for sure. Wouldn't you agree? There's one, if you're an ENTP, you're going to be called a debater. And my brother is this, and you can tell from within like a few minutes of meeting him that he is a debater, because these people are all about questioning how the functionings of how things work and all the things that S types have put into place, and they think, why is that that way? Why do you need this? I don't get it. I don't get it.
They might seem argumentative, but this type legitimately just loves the debate. And that's, I think, how you could tell the difference between this ENTP versus if you were an ENTJ or any other TJ type. The TJ would want to come to an absolute conclusion, whereas the prospecting type just loves the process.
Just
and
loves
doesn't
to
really
argue
care
for
if
fun.
it goes off nowhere.
So we have the external as a debater, and the internal
So
function is a logician, right? INTP?
Yeah, if you're an INTP, you're going to be a logician. These people are going to, they always say they are the mathematicians and everything because they love data so much. They're not, though, the logistician. The logistician will take the data and apply it, or take data that's already known and more focused on the present, whereas a logician, an INTP, is going to be more focused on finding information just for the sake of finding it and questioning these ideas that they have.
They're the case study person. They're like you said about the scientists. They're the
Mathematician.
the mathematician. That's what she said.
Yeah,
Sorry.
or you're scientist.
So if you're an INTP, you're going to notice that you're the kind of person who loves to find data, whether it's about personality types or research, any sort of information. You're going to love taking it in, but then you don't have this need to apply it.
Perfectly summarized. To recap, so if you're if you're a TP, you're thinking, you're putting things in categories, you don't necessarily want to stick with a long-term plan, you have the ability to bounce around between things. You're an N of that, NTP, you reach for ideas and information, okay? Extroverted, you're ready to debate it. I think of Jiraiya, he researches the most random information about dogs, about
Jersey cows,
anything, and just spits out random ideas. He will probably never do anything with those ideas unless he has a judging type
I'm
in
sure
his life.
lawyers are also often debaters. I mean, I'm sure you can have lots of personality types, but think about this person is like a lawyer in everything.
Objection. we just asked if you wanted dinner.
I really want to know if Matthew McConaughey is this type, because I read his book right now, and I'm like, he has to be a debater. He has to be an ENTP.
Yeah, so if Matthew McConaughey, you're reading this. you're watching this.
Introvert is going to be, we know a couple like this, that they have all the information about everything, and I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do with it? Well,
Yeah.
we
So
don't
these
go
people-
that far. We just
Yeah.
have all these amazing random ideas.
But we
they
don't
just
need
kinda
to follow it through.
We might talk about it, but we're not going to do anything like applicable with it.
All right.
Okay.
And so then there's the STPs. So that means there's going to be...
This is the key with the STPs. Hands. They're hands on.
Okay.
They're hands on, not ideas.
They are builders. They're unique, creative. They're creative builders, but not in a judging type. Oh, I fit into this job and I build like I'm a contractor. No, they like building things in creative and unique ways. They like, even if it's not building. So I think about how Isabel she's always baking, or she makes her kombucha every day. She always does things textile with her hands, and she paints, she draws. She loves to create with her hands. While the NJ types might like
NP, you mean? We're talking about
the NP likes to be creative within their head with ideas. The SPs like to be creative
With the
in
present.
actual reality.
Yeah, so you're going to notice a big difference between SPs versus NPs is that NPs are going to be more throwing out ideas, and SPs are going to be more the doers, who you see are always creating arts and crafts, creating always. And you're going to also notice too, if you're an STP, these people are not very worried about what other people think, as far as like, they're not the empathic types like, oh, what is this person thinking of me? They're more individualistic and going to
That
do
doesn't
their
mean
own
they're
thing.
not likable. So the big ones, so we said STP. An I is Isabel, but barely. An I is Isabel, so she changes like,
Called the
I'm gonna
virtuoso.
you're like, oh, I'm gonna fix this for a while, and then I'm gonna work on this with my hands, and then the opposite, the E version of it, is literally an entrepreneur. And so what makes them really, I think in this one, they're very easy to tell apart. They're taking in the world around them and engaging in it. See a problem, solve a problem.
Yes,
It's
see a need,
truly,
fill a need.
thank you. And so they, the extroverted function of this is, think about, okay, they took tangible details and they go into the world with them and see what I can do. And it's true, that's what makes them so successful as entrepreneurs, because they don't really care what people are thinking.
And another thing for virtuosos, these are the common types that you see are the builders and the mechanics of the world. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and so the big difference between the two, I think there's a pretty obvious difference, but that obvious difference to me is, so their first function is SE. So they're looking at the world around them and they're taking in details and details. The difference is, a virtuoso is not going to be spitting out all the ideas about what they see. They're just going to start doing things with it. Whereas the ESTP
likes to talk about
all the things that they see, and that's what makes them good entrepreneurs, because they see all the things and the things that need to be done, and they go tell people, and they talk to people a lot. Whereas the introvirtuoso is just going to acquire all that and say, what can I do with this?
And keep to themselves. Well, okay. So
Okay,
now
so
we're on.
okay.
Well, great.
Okay, so those are your TP. Let's go to FP side. So for FP, we have NFPs.
So the NFPs, these people are the dreamers. These are the idealistic people who, there's a movie, I can't remember where, but there's persons like, I just want to have, what is it? Like, I just want rainbows and smiles in the world and everyone to be happy. That's kind of their attitude. And so
They're also, though, in
yeah.
homeschooling, they're what I consider your wild child.
Yeah.
Right? They're the ones that they are hard.
They're hard to teach.
They don't, well, what's ironic though is I'm like, my brother is like
Here,
valedictorian, but typically
So if you're an NFP, you're going to be more ideas focused, and you're going to be emotionally driven by those ideas. You're not going to be taking in all the information. You are not at all information driven. You don't care if they have the facts.
At least on
and you
the
don't care.
subconscious level. On the conscious level, you might, anyone can go to school and teach themselves how to study, right? But on a subconscious level, these people are actually driven emotionally by, maybe they're good at acquiring information because then they get validation and it makes them internally, subconsciously feel good about themselves, and that's what drives them. They want to make sure that on the inside, deep down, they always feel happy and good.
Yeah. And so if you're an NFP, you're either going to be an introverted, INFP, or an extroverted, ENFP. Let's start with the ENFP because these people, are very much stand out a lot.
Now, we should say first, these are really awesome people, but I feel bad because the world does not work in their favor.
Yeah. So these people are called the campaigners.
So they have, actually, let me add too, because a lot of you awesome people, there's a good chance that you're taking this course because you're drawn to my personality type. If you're in here and you're amazing, but like self-doubt, because the world didn't set you up for it, you're going to get self-doubt because you're like, oh, I'm not getting affirmation for what I feel internally.
Yeah. So the ENFP is called the campaigner. So they're going to be different though from the debater, but they're going to have a lot of similarities. The debater is about the debate and researching all the information and then spitting it out at you.
And they love just the
questioning
debate. They don't care about being right. They just love the debate.
Yeah,
right?
and they don't mind so much of people's emotions. They'll just be like, well, this is what I think is logical. Whereas the campaigner is going to have a little bit of that debative attitude. But they're going to be more concerned with others' feelings. So they say, oh, I want to, what about this thing? Let's talk about it. But I want to make sure that you feel emotionally okay and that I feel emotionally okay.
I'm not going to hurt your feelings.
So these people also tend to be the optimists. They appear to be optimists for the most part, wouldn't you say? And that when you meet them, they're going to seem very spontaneous and almost like a golden retriever.
Honestly, I think this is actually the most spontaneously, I wish I had a better way to explain this. They're kind of golden retriever puppy. That's actually a good
Imagine if you took a golden retriever puppy and then accidentally transformed it to a human being.
They're so likable, and I think the hard thing for you, if you're this type, it's more an internal frustration because you're like kind of the buddy. Everybody really likes you. You're reaching out to people. They're reaching back to you a lot, but you just want to be able to take this next step and just like, oh,
they're great at adding fun to things. That's why we call them a campaigner. So if someone I think about in a business, they're totally the campaigner because if someone was an architect or an entrepreneur and they had this idea for their business and how they want to help someone, the campaigner is the person you look to make there be hype around this, make it look fun, make it seem awesome, because they can take anything and they can add optimism to anything. They're the joyful ones and they're spontaneous. They'll do things like
So if you're joyful, spontaneous, you like to just question ideas and have all these random ideas, but necessarily don't have any applying.
But you haven't actually checked off all those goals and ideas.
Then that means you're a campaigner, probably.
Versus the introverted version of that is a mediator.
Yeah, and a mediator is going to be a lot like a campaigner, but these people are very introverted.
Wait, not very introverted. INFPs are often think of themselves as extroverts, and even personally from an external perspective, I often see mediators as extroverted people because their F and their N is so strong that they're so open-minded and they're so likable and sociable that they seem like extroverts, but truthfully it's just the
difference is that your first and second function will be flipped, whereas campaigners goes NEFI, a mediator goes FINE. So feelings come first for them. They're always very aware of how they're feeling and very in tune with their emotions, and then they want to talk about the ideas. So these people, how you're going to tell the difference between a campaigner and mediator, in my opinion, is that you're going to see these people are perfectly fine being alone for most of the part, whereas campaigners, it gives them they do not enjoy being alone.
If you're really close to them, it's probably harder to tell them apart.
That's true. I would say the introvert has a calmer demeanor, wouldn't you say? Whereas the extrovert tends to have a lot of energy, although it's not always true. So
I also think the INFPs I know versus ENFPs take more risks and have a little more follow through. They'll jump from career to career over time because it's like they're almost a little bit more in tune with that FI and know that they need more stimulus in their life and can hold themselves a little bit more accountable. ENFPs, they have way less follow through. And they need to bounce around, but like if they bounce around too much, they end up being lost.
Yeah, so these even NFPs do great on routine too.
Okay, so let's go over to SFPs now. So the first, extroverted of an SFP, ESFP, is an entertainer.
And the entertainers are going to be a little different from the campaigners, whereas the campaigners are a little more focused on random ideas, like a debater and a campaigner both are. An entertainer is going to be S, and that's going to make a big difference because they're going to be focused on the now, and they're going to be the life of the party. They're going to be the people who love to be center stage, getting the attention on them and making sure that everyone's having a good time. And if they're not, they're going to be great at restarting the party up and getting everyone on the dance floor type, right?
Yes, and I think this type tends to be, because they do have an FI function, they're highly attuned with the S and the details that are in front of them, but because they're FI, usually it's the sensory of their physical experience, don't you think?
Yeah, that's definitely a point, is that they're going to be, no, that makes sense. Like, they're going to be, because they're S, they're going to be focused on having a good experience.
Yes,
right?
it's not about your experience, it's about my physical
How I
sensory
feel
experience.
while I'm entertaining, as opposed to the console who's
the
like
console's
making
gonna be like,
sure,
how are you?
Are you okay? It's like, I'm here, let's go.
Yeah, and then
the
you have the introverted version, which is called the adventurer. It is an ISFP. The only difference again is that the first and second functions are flipped, and so it's going to be first emotions, then experience, rather than experience and then emotions. And how you're going to see this is that these people are not so much the fans of the parties. It's more of a difference than how mediator and campaigner were. The introvert versus extrovert is going to stand out here more. You're going to definitely tell if someone's extroverted, an entertainer, but if they're introverted, they're going to be more artistically driven, and they're going to be more to themselves and focused on doing what feels good to them. So a little like that virtuoso who loves to build and stuff. They're going to be very similar, but they're going to be more focused on their emotions.
They also spend a lot more time categorizing things in their life, right?
Yeah.
Virtuosos?
Adventurers, because they're detail oriented, right? They see the world, and they might like to be engaged in life and stuff, but they definitely have to retract back. Whereas like a campaigner and an entertainer, the ENFP, ESFP, I don't think they ever need necessarily time alone. They get it. The E's.
Oh,
they don't need time alone.
No, they're like, they
They're
can
good to
literally go from like one meetup to another party to work they are so extroverted. And the eyes of both of those, the mediator and the adventurer,
they need a break.
Definitely need a break.
Two notes are the entertainer. Every entertainer I know willingly says, yes, I really just want attention. They're aware of the fact that they love to be the center of attention. And the adventurer, something I notice about them is because they are F types. They do have FI, but just generally they're F types. And so they sometimes have defenderish tendencies. So they'll, especially at first, they'll tend to be caring, compassionate, trying to be loving. But then when you get to know them more, they might let true nature come out more, which is a little bit more FI.
Yeah, so they try to be they have an F, so they're very caring and they want to connect with people, but then if you push them a little too far, or they can get defensive.
I was laughing because like we're all higher consciousness and we all should just get along, but my personality type does not necessarily mesh well with that personality type, more because we're both extroverted natures, and so.
Are we talking about entertainer now?
Okay, I was laughing about that earlier. Entertainers and commanders, because an entertainer's like kind of assertive, like, yeah, I'm ready to party, I know, let's do this, and it's like all over the place. And then someone like me comes in with their well, this is the best way to do it, like if we're gonna have a concert, we gotta have our concert this way, and they're just like, I just want to have a concert, like let's just leave your organization out of this, and right? It's kind of like that, because I know a lot of entertainers that it's like we can both, if we like agree, like, yeah, let's have this kind of concert, we're amazing, unstoppable. But then, so Tatiana is an entertainer, and I think of when we hit heads,
the youngest child, she's 10 years old,
and it's more because, and we're both like have this extroverted function, and we're both FI, so we both care about our own feelings. So if they don't align, it's gonna be, no, but it's my feelings, but
you're like my ideas, and they're all my sensory experience.
Yeah. To sum up for the 4 types, how to tell the difference. Campaigner is going to be slightly like a debater and
slightly puppy doggish.
Yeah, puppy doggish. Let's have fun. Let's rile up the party, and like I just want to talk to you about my ideas that are completely random and not going to really do them. Introverted version, mediator, is going to like time alone, and will need breaks from people, but still have a little bit of that happiness, joyful attitude like a campaigner. And if you're an entertainer, you're not going to be like a campaigner, ideas focused. You're going to be about the party now. And if you're an adventurer, you're going to be a little mix of the entertainer and the mediator, and you're going to be very artistically driven and focused on your own feelings.
All right. So now we're going to go into cognitive functions. So we threw this word out a lot of times. And so cognitive functions, so we just came up with 16 different personality types. We each have 4 functions that we use. The first function develops very young. It's
your
our
dominant
natural,
one.
Right. And
What
then
you
the
first go to.
secondary develops around your teen years. So most of us watching this video have the first 2 functions kind of established. We can really use on that for reliability if we practice self-awareness to think of how we engage in the world. Our cognitive function is the operating system, our computer in how our brain works. And you should know if you have kids or you've been in a relationship that not all people's brains work the same.
And then your third function is one that develops around when you're middle of your life, middle age, and it's one that is called your tertiary, and it's the third thing you go to, but you're not very developed. It tends to be your weakness in your functions. You're like, oh, I'm not very good at that.
It's worth noting, and then there's your 4th function. What's the 4th one called?
And your 4th one is your inferior function, your weakness.
Right, and so really quick, for the last 2 functions, it's important to note that if you work on yourself a lot, if you work on understanding yourself, you might have your 3rd and 4th already developed and they're just weak. It's not that you don't have them at all. If you know,
I think
it's
also,
not like, oh, you don't get your 4th one until you're 80 years old. Okay?
Yeah. Your function, for me, I like to do everything, like a debater almost. Process of elimination is when we go through these functions, or basically you have a sheet with these functions on them, is think about like, if any, it's almost like process of elimination. Which ones do you not even have? Because 4, you're not even going to have. When I think about SI, I don't have, like, I feel like, oh, I don't even have that at all. Because SE is my last one that I'm working on, but the first one, so I don't, when I get together with my sister, she seems to remember every single bad thing that happened in our childhood. I'm like, really? I don't really, no, it was good. Because I don't have that past detail oriented to specific things. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so